Can't type.
Hi, Teresa, welcome. Teresa, as you get settled in, we're just kind of typing in the chat some of the questions that we're coming to this presentation with. So if you have immediate questions, feel free to type them in the chat. And after Dr. Dawn gives her introduction and presentation, we're gonna jump into those. And as I mentioned to the others, this presentation is being recorded, so don't worry about taking notes. I will share the recording with you and the rest of the community afterward. If you know somebody who could really benefit from this opportunity, do forward them this link, or text them and say, hey, I'm with a doctor right now. What are your questions? You know, let's take advantage of this wonderful resource. Dr. Dawn, whenever you're ready.
Excellent. Well, with a group of this size, maybe we could even do introductions all the way around.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Well, I can start for folks who maybe don't know me. I'm the social justice coordinator at St. Anthony. And I was really excited to reach out to OHA and Dr. Dawn to see how we can raise awareness about the safety and the effectiveness of the existing COVID-19 vaccines. As we know, in the next few days, the vaccine will be accessible to everybody now. And so I really think it's huge, very important right now to be informed, be educated, so that we can make an educated decision that, you know, hopefully we can all be vaccinated for the common good of everybody, not just in our community. So thank you all for making the time to come here. Maybe we can start. Phyllis, do you want to introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll end with Dr. Dawn.
Well, okay. My name is Phyllis Newble, and I've been going to St. Anthony's for about 6 years.
Awesome. Thank you, Phyllis. Teresa, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
She's on mute.
Yeah. We'll come back around to Teresa then if she can find her unmute button. Olga.
Hi, I am Olga. I went with the San Antonio community for 10 years. My kids go to San Antonio school too.
And she knows my brother. Small world.
Yes, I know you are a small world. Yes, that's true.
I wonder if you've worked on my teeth before. No,
I don't think so.
Yeah, okay. Monica?
Yeah, my name is Monica Vallejos, and I've been part of the community since 2002. So, and it's so great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. My name is Dawn Mautner. I am a family physician. When I see patients, I am at Virginia Garcia, usually in McMinnville. at the clinic. I serve in two capacities at the Oregon Health Authority. One is as the Medicaid medical director for the state, and the other is as the senior health advisor for the COVID response. And that role has given us an opportunity to learn a lot really fast over the last year. And the purpose of my being here tonight is to share information with you that I know to be true from the science to the best of my ability to read and interpret the science. And what I promise is that when I don't know the answer, I'll say, I don't know the answer. And when the science doesn't seem conclusive, I will say, the science doesn't seem conclusive. We don't know that yet. We're still waiting for evidence, or evidence suggests, but I will work very hard not to exaggerate what the science does and doesn't tell us. I'll do my best to be very truthful about that. My feeling is that this vaccine question is very personal and critically important, and I want everybody to have all the information they need to make the very best decision for them and for their family. As we all know, COVID has been catastrophic for our communities, and we've closed things down, and all kinds of impacts have been felt. And some people are pretty scared of vaccines, and these have come along pretty fast. So there are some really good and important questions to ask about what we're looking at. Okay. So how do I share my slideshow?
So at the bottom of your screen, you should see a little bar with several options. There's a participants button, a chat button, and then in the middle of the green button that says share screen.
There it is. This one. I think it's this one. That doesn't look like it, does it?
I see COVID-19 vaccine, Oregon Health Authority, Dr. Don Muttner.
I see it too.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you have several monitors, you just kind of have to find it, but we can see it.
Okay. So let's start here and see if this works. How's that going? Did that go to the next one? It did not.
No.
How did that one go?
There we go.
Uh-huh.
See media.
Yeah. Okay. So this is not intended for the media, but I'm pretty sure that I just met everybody on this call. Is anybody from the media? It's not for the media. Okay. I have no disclosures to make. And the objectives of this conversation are to tell you what we know and what we don't know. Introductions, acknowledgements, we'll talk about vaccines, we'll talk about their safety. I want to make sure that I clarify some things wherever we do have data. And then for those who are looking for a way to get vaccinated, we'll talk about that. I'd like to acknowledge the community and express my gratitude for your coming. Thank you for coming to get data from what I hope is a credible source. We also acknowledge that communities most impacted by racism, systemic inequity, and trauma are the communities most impacted by COVID-19. And we know that COVID-19 has been very hard on you, your communities, your loved ones. Danny, is there a way for me to switch this to a different monitor?
So what you would have to do, I think, you want to minimize that window because it automatically makes it into full screen. And so if you go to the corner of your window, you want to minimize it and then adjust the size so it fits on whatever monitor you want it to be on.
Uh-huh. So this should be here. I had it up a minute ago, and I think it's the way it's interacting with Zoom. Let's try this again. How about that? Is that working?
No.
Okay. Forgive me, everybody.
Alternatively, you could send it to me, and so you don't have to worry about it. I could also clicking through it. I don't know, whatever your preference is.
I think I'd like to try it here. And if it doesn't work, we'll figure something else out.
Yep.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Back to the top.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it.
Okay. Well, it's still over there. So we'll roll with it and you'll have a sideways video of me. Sorry. We already did some introductions. And I'd like to start with, wait, did I do an acknowledgement? That was the acknowledgement. Here we go. COVID-19, you all know pretty well what COVID-19 is all about. Coronavirus 2019 is where we are finding ourselves now. And coronavirus has had very different impacts on different communities. It has devastated communities across the world, but it has devastated some communities more than others. And I want you to know that we acknowledge that as we are seeing the impacts more intensively in communities of color, the Latinx and Black and Pacific Islander communities in particular. The vaccines currently available in the United States are Pfizer, Moderna, and Pfizer and Moderna. J&J went on hiatus as of yesterday, and I'll have some specific information about that pause. As you know, the Pfizer and the Moderna shots are both 2 shots. One is 3 weeks. The 2 shots are 3 weeks apart. For Moderna, they're 4 weeks apart. Those are mRNA vaccines. mRNA vaccines are new, but mRNA technology has been studied for decades and has been used in cancer treatments for years. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine uses a standard viral vector of adenovirus, just like other ones, the Ebola vaccine that's being used right now. And so it works a little bit differently in that way, but the fundamental mechanism is the same. The way that vaccines work is they teach your body to recognize the infection so you don't get sick. Your immune system will make antibodies, which are the alarm system, to recognize when the invader, which in this case is the SARS-CoV-2 virus, the virus that causes the illness of COVID-19, when the virus enters the body, the antibodies recognize it and tell the immune system to attack the virus before it can make you sick. The spike protein that shows up that makes these coronaviruses look like coronas, crowns, that's the protein that the antibodies recognize. And the way the vaccines work is by teaching cells to recognize that protein, so that when that protein comes in the form of a virus, that's what sets off your immune system. EUA stands for Emergency Use Authorization. That is the mechanism by which these vaccines have been authorized. It's different from the approval process because it's expedited, it's fast. That's because we have a global pandemic and so many people have been dying. So this is the fast track approval process. That's scary. It scared me when I first heard about it. And I was wondering how they could possibly make it safe enough if they're making it fast. And a year ago, I said, we won't have a vaccine in a year. They can't do it. Turns out they had some methods that I didn't know about. And I have done a good deal of study because it seemed to me really hard to do the level of rigor in the studies to know that they were going to be safe and effective in a shorter time period. That I thought you had to do things all in a row and that it would take a certain period of time. Turns out they have some ways to make it faster that require money. And so they threw money at it and that helped. I'll go into a little detail here in a minute. So were they rigorously tested? 70,000 people plus participated in trials only for Pfizer and Moderna. They didn't skip steps. The initial trials included a minimum of 8 weeks of follow-up for at least half of the people, but there was more than that. And you can go to the FDA website and it tells you more details. They were evaluated for safety by three different advisory committees. The Vaccine and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee advises the FDA. ACIP advises the CDC. That's the one that met today about Johnson & Johnson. And then the Western states made a consortium called the Western States Vaccine Safety Committee. And those folks came together with recommendations for the Western states alone, but it was a separate evaluation of the safety and effectiveness of each of these. The speed at which the vaccines were developed is remarkable. That success is due to a couple of things. One is a lot of money, right? They threw a lot of resources at making this advance the focus of a whole lot of attention and people's work, knowing that there was going to be massive uptake if they were able to generate the vaccine that was effective. For the mRNA vaccines, advances in scientific technology and RNA manipulation, rapid speed of viral RNA sequencing, development of vaccine platforms that could be used to deliver that material, those things have happened over the course of the last several years on the basis of over 20 years, even 30 years of research around mRNA and what it might be used to do. So it's building on decades of research, even though vaccine delivery of mRNA technology is fairly new. Recognize also the opportunity, within the crisis of the global pandemic. A huge number of people, individuals, were available for vaccine studies. Typically, when you're trying to prove that a vaccine works, we call it the rate limiting step. The bottleneck is finding a large enough sample of people with the disease that can be involved with the study, so it can take years. However, for better or for worse, being in the middle of a pandemic, we went from sequencing the viral DNA to development of the vaccine to thorough study in less than 12 months because, as I said, tens of thousands of people, millions already, have been infected and were available and willing to participate in the trials. That gives a huge body of information and evidence to be examined, including information that wasn't initially sought, like they didn't enroll pregnant people on purpose in those trials in the initial phases, because that's not how we do things. We leave that until later. It turns out that there were pregnant people in the studies anyway, even though they didn't go looking, because that's how pregnancy works. So we do have a good deal of information about that and about breastfeeding. I'll go into those as well. J&J. So as you all have heard, no doubt, Johnson & Johnson has been pulled for the moment. We've put it on pause because there were some episodes of clots that are pretty dangerous. Now, the reason that there have been 6 events in 6 individuals is because we've immunized 7 million people in a very short period of time and on the global stage with vaccines that are getting a great deal of scrutiny. In the initial tests for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, 0.05% of their participants, 0.06% of their participants had some kind of clotting event. That's a tiny number. 0.05% in the placebo arm of their randomized controlled trial. So people who didn't get the vaccine also had a clotting event. And we know that people who get COVID-19 are very likely to get clotting events, very dangerous ones. So the question that we have to ask isn't, does this vaccine cause a lot of clots? The question that we have to ask is, is the risk of clot from this vaccine greater than the risk of COVID, the risk of clotting from COVID if we don't get vaccinated, the risk of all the other things associated with COVID if we don't get the vaccine. The comparison, figuring out what the right comparison is a really important part of doing risk assessment. We're not very good at that as humans. We get scared, and sometimes not in the most rational way. That's how fear works, right? So they are going to continue to investigate the ACIP, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. They're the ones who met today. And as of 4:45 p.m., my colleague was on that call and updated this slide and shared it with me so that I could share it with you tonight, that the 7 to 10 day pause on use of Johnson & Johnson will give them a chance to reach around the world for as much data as they can get their hands on and see the analyses that are being done to see whether there is a risk of clotting that is worth actually pulling the vaccine or impacting, for example, who gets the vaccine. Because as you may have heard, it was all women of roughly reproductive age. And so that is certainly of concern if they're going to talk about targeting this vaccine to specific populations that aren't at higher risk. And that's part of what they'll be thinking about when they develop their recommendations. So until then, the alternatives remain, right? mRNA vaccine, which is Pfizer or Moderna, continuing, of course, to do all the COVID precautions that we have been doing for the last year, masking, physically distancing, washing hands, although that's less useful for this than for a lot of other illnesses. And for sure, when we're getting together with others, socializing outside, indoor spaces being much more likely to carry risk of transmission. Would folks like to ask more questions about that right now?
About the Johnson & Johnson vaccine specifically?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Let me check from the group. I see Monica, you've had a hand up for a while. I wasn't sure if it was related to the Johnson or it was an accident, but yeah. Do folks have any specific follow-up questions about Johnson & Johnson vaccine?
No.
No?
No? That
No,
was
thank
good.
you.
No questions.
I do, Phyllis.
Or Phyllis?
Does the Johnson & Johnson have aborted fetus cells in it?
That is a good question. The answer to the question is no, but it's not as simple as that, as you probably are aware. We'll get to that. I have a slide on it. It's an important question.
Awesome. So we'll address that question. Cool. So if there's no other Johnson & Johnson specific questions, yeah, we can keep going down.
Okay. All right, vaccine protection. This is a hard thing to do. Comparing these vaccines to each other is hard. And the reason that it's hard is because they were tested at different times in different environments. The Pfizer and Moderna were tested early on before we had much in the way of variants. The Johnson & Johnson came later. And by the time Johnson & Johnson was being tested and in the places where it was tested, which were different, there was a much broader array of variants, and the numbers are a little lower for the Johnson & Johnson, but they're still really good. And we don't have the same kind of numbers for Pfizer and Moderna. So we were worried that because the numbers here, the 86% was lower than the Pfizer and Moderna numbers of 94 and 95%, that people wouldn't want it. It turns out that people are smarter than that, which is exciting. We've had pretty good uptake. I really wanted the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. I was not able to get it. The most important things to know are that in those trials, in tens of thousands of people, did it prevent death? Yes, it did. 100% of the time, no matter which vaccine you got, 100% of the time. We're not going to see that in the population. Some people who get the vaccine are also going to get COVID and are going to die within a time frame that we would consider them to be fully vaccinated, because that's how populations are. We can expect that the sample sizes, even though they were strong samples and trials, some people, we will see that in the billions of people who will wind up getting vaccinated. However, these are really remarkable numbers. We'll see a lot more about this over the coming year, because again, so many millions of people are being vaccinated around the world. 100% against death, 85 to 95% against hospitalization. Another thing to keep in mind is that 95%, 86% means some people are going to wind up getting sick, even though they have the vaccine. And that could be with the regular, routine, what we call wild type strain, the original strain or variant of this disease, or the non-variant. And it's okay. It still means the vaccines are working. The likelihood is that that illness was not as severe as it might have been. We're still waiting for evidence on that. But breakthrough cases aren't necessarily cause for panic. We expect them. The variants, B117 originated in the UK, 1351 originated in South Africa. The P1 from Brazil, that's the one that that is most likely to, seems most likely to cause trouble with the vaccines, with resistance. But we don't have much, I think we may not have any P1 in Oregon. We do have, there are some others now from California. We don't have extensive spread of these, and we're not seeing massive spread of variants in vaccinated people, which is important. We expect the virus to change over time. These are the mutations in the genetic code that add up to variants or different strains. We're still going to have to see how things play out against that. Some of the variants, like P1, may be able to evade some of the vaccines. But there are a couple of reasons not to be panicky about that, even though we need to be concerned and we need to move quickly. The more and the sooner people get vaccinated, the fewer variants will have time to emerge, because they result from a sequence of mutations stacking up, because they mutate all the time, right? But some of the variants, that P1 tweaks its little spike protein, so that the vaccines, which have been targeted to find the antibodies, which have now been targeted to find that spike protein, see something that's different. And that's why we are concerned that maybe it won't be as effective against that particular variant. But again, the more quickly we can get people vaccinated, the fewer variants will have a chance to evolve. That said, the mRNA vaccines, they can be tweaked pretty easily, or so I am told. That's what the scientists who work on it say. So if that were the case, then we would be in a situation where we would be seeing, like the flu, maybe a more rhythmic need or seasonal need to get a new version of the vaccine. COVID's going to be with us for a while. We're not going to get the kind of uptake that we would need and the kind of time frame we would need to wipe it out. So, so it may well wind up being a situation like that. But quien sabe, we'll have to see how that turns out. Evidence is still pending. The data are weak. All right, side effects from the vaccine. Sore arm, this is like all vaccines, right? Sore arm, tiredness, maybe you get a headache, you might get a fever or chills, muscle aches or soreness. If you have trouble breathing, that's a different animal, right? Now we're talking about maybe anaphylaxis, that one scary allergic reaction that could be really bad for you, potentially fatal. We haven't seen high levels of anaphylaxis, again, because we're examining so much of this so carefully. These cases get a lot of attention, and well, they should. But the numbers of them per numbers of people that have been vaccinated, those are huge numbers, and it does not seem to be running higher. Most of these side effects should go away in a few days. If they're lasting longer than that, then it's worth calling a provider. So many of the questions, so many questions have come, so many. Long-term safety concerns. We have no reason to believe that there will be long-term safety issues knowing what we know. Of course, we don't know yet. These have only been developed in the last year. We don't know. However, we know a lot about a lot of the pieces. Adenovirus vaccines have been used pretty extensively. We have a good deal of experience with that. There's no reason to believe that long-term negative outcomes are going to come from that. Even though mRNA has not been used in vaccines, the cancer therapies that have been used for a decade have shown no long-term safety concerns. And the side effects, like pain at the site and a little redness, swelling, feeling a little achy, that reflects that your immune system is working, and those will resolve within a few days of vaccination. Do they cause sterilization? No, that's a myth. That's a myth. There's no reason to think that it would, that we have seen, and they're examining that data pretty closely. Do they contain pork cells or fetal cells? No pork products. They do not contain any animal or human material. They are made up of synthetically engineered genetic material and cholesterol in the mRNA vaccines, and those are created in the lab. Now, the fetal cells question is an important one. The use of fetal cells lines to develop the technology is different from the use of fetal cells in production. And at the end of the day, none of the 3 vaccines have any fetal material anywhere in them. There were a couple of abortions in the 70s and 80s that produced some cell lines that have been used commercially since then, and those were used in the development of Pfizer and Moderna, in the production of J&J, but are not in the vaccines that you receive. They are not. And
Dawn,
yeah.
could you back up? I got a little confused about what you said about the aborted cells not being used, and then there was something else about them just a little bit earlier, about a couple sentences before that.
Yeah, they were. So the fetal cell lines that are used to that are commercially available are not used for ongoing in the ongoing vaccines. The product that one receives doesn't have any of those things. The Pfizer and the Moderna used fetal cell lines in the very early stages in the development of the product, but are not used at all in the ongoing production. So the thing as it exists now doesn't come anywhere near the lines of cells that have been developed from tissue that is, I guess, 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. 40 years ago, an abortion occurred, cell lines were generated from that, and those cells are thousands and thousands and thousands of generations along and are used in the development of products like this. So they were used for that. They are thousands of generations away, and there are a variety of Catholic authorities from across the globe who have chimed in on whether they think it's okay to do this one or that one or not. And the majority of the ones that I've seen, there are some who say it's a bad idea specifically to use the Johnson & Johnson because it has been used. Fetal cells have been used in production for that one. Most of them say that that because of the impact of COVID on the community, that the lesser challenge is getting the vaccine. The lesser difficulty for the community is getting the vaccine. And if there is concern about that, that the Pfizer or the Moderna would be a better choice in that case. Does that answer your question, Phyllis?
Yeah, thank you.
You bet.
If folks haven't read any statements from the US bishops about the ethical stance or the moral question related to the vaccines, I put a link in the chat for you to check out. That's mainly for the Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca. And I could put another one related to the Johnson & Johnson. But it echoes much of what Dr. Don just said in that, especially the Pfizer and Moderna, then that it is just and in fact morally necessary to take either of those two. There were some more reservations around the AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson, as Dr. Don said, but you can read for yourself.
Thank you, Danny. That I was trying to think of how I could get that that resource available to you so that your friends and colleagues here could access the voices of the authorities along the lines of your own faith. Absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. Additional concerns that we've fielded. The dosing is the same from the first to the second, but you may have different side effects because your immune system activation started the first time around. So you get a second dose and now your immune system might be like, oh wait, now maybe I know what that is, and flare a little bit more, generating a lot more antibodies, which means that the next time it comes into contact, it's ready to go. No chips, no microchips, no tracking. There is no evidence suggesting that spreading the doses farther apart might be a problem. You may be aware that the UK, in the UK, they chose to give a lot more people first doses rather than follow the protocol to make the timing correct. So if they had a certain number, they would spread it across as many people as that and maybe have to delay the second shot. That seems to be working okay, but we still don't have good evidence to describe whether and how much of that is fine. Pregnant or breastfeeding, there is no evidence to suggest that there is a problem with pregnancy or with breastfeeding. We do have now some fresh new data that says that the antibodies can be found in breast milk. So just like other vaccine preventable diseases, you may be able to pass on some immunity to your baby if you're breastfeeding after you've been vaccinated. So that's exciting. But if you have questions about that, that's to talk with your obstetric provider about it. The current stance is that it's probably riskier to get COVID than it is to get the vaccine, and the vaccine is probably the best idea. Anybody in Oregon ought to be able to get this vaccine for free. If you have insurance, they'll be billed maybe, but if you don't have insurance, it'll be free.
Don, can you talk about any information or what information do they ask about? So like I know, people sometimes they are immigrants or undocumented,
undocumented, right?
For whatever reason, right? That they might be concerned of sharing personal information. So can you maybe speak to what kind of personal information is required to give?
Yeah, so the database that the state database is called Alert, that keeps the immunization information. Most of us know Alert because we have to get a vaccine printout of our kids' immunizations for school, right? So Alert keeps track of who's got what. For that, you need your name and your date of birth and where you are, and what vaccine you got, and what day it was. The rest of the information is you may be asked for it, but it's not necessary to share it. You won't be asked for status of documentation. You might well be asked for identification of some sort, but But documentation status should not keep anybody from getting this vaccine. It isn't something that anybody is being asked for. And even though there are people in uniform, in military uniform at a lot of the sites, because the reserves are helping out with registering people and giving vaccines and stuff, there is no immigration enforcement or ICE presence or anything like that at any of the vaccine sites. That's a really critical element that we're working really hard to be sure people are aware of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you bet.
like, what if there's people traveling who are tourists here, they're on a tourist visa, for example, or a student visa? Like, can those kinds of groups also get the vaccine here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody who's here, we want everybody to get it, right? That's how you get to community immunity. Yeah. Yeah. For sure. If you already experienced COVID, should you get the vaccine? The answer to that one is yes. The immunity that you get after you get an infection typically is more narrow and less long lasting than from vaccines. Theoretically, we should be able to protect better with a vaccine, not only against more strains, but also for longer. Data on that is still pending too. We don't have solid evidence of any of those things yet. Okay, can I get a vaccine? You bet, get a vaccine. This is how you can do it. It's a little bit hard to do, but as you may be aware, you know, we took out all our sequencing slide. When am I going to be eligible? We took them all out because what's happening Monday? Everybody's becoming eligible. This makes it harder for groups that might have had difficulty accessing it. Language barriers, difficulty with technology. All this stuff is being done by the internet. People who don't have facility with the internet. So use 211 covidvaccine.org.gov. If you can sign up for Get Vaccinated Oregon, I'll get to that one in a minute, then it will call you or text you when you're eligible, once you figure that out. Once you log in and register, it'll not when you're eligible, but when you're being invited to sign up. Now everybody can do it as of Monday. Local public health authorities are running it in their regions. The pharmacies have their own signups online, community clinics for sure. Mass vaccination sites are the ones where people who don't have trouble accessing it can get it. But we've vaccinated people who want to be vaccinated within the facilities all over the state. covidvaccine.oregon.gov, getvaccinated.oregon.gov. That's for mass vaccination sites. And, you know, we're trying to get vaccine into the hands of the providers throughout the communities, so that people can get the vaccine or get their questions answered by providers that they trust, people that they know. And that it's hard to do, but we want to do it.
Yeah, we've had a couple clinics at St. Anthony's, Don, and we don't know when the next ones will be, but I would encourage you to keep an eye out. And when they come available, you'll get a link and you'll be able to sign up. But it all depends on the county and when they give us the green light. But like I said, just keep an eye out.
And that concludes my slides. Yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
Monica?
Yeah, the vaccination clinic gonna be May 1st. On May 1st, gonna be at St. Anthony.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, which ones did I miss? Why does everyone have to get the shot? If people don't get the shot and they don't have that immunity against the COVID, then the virus keeps running around in the community. And even though few people really get sick and die, it's still having a chance to mutate. And as long as it gets to run around in the community and mutate, we're going to get new variants with new ways to defend against the vaccines and the potential for pandemic is there still and again. That's how we get to community immunity, is by getting, they keep saying 70% maybe, or 80% vaccinated. And given that kids can't be vaccinated yet, that's going to be hard to reach anyway. Pfizer did just submit for emergency use authorization for 12 to 15-year-olds, which will be amazing if we can get, if it is safe for them.
Do you want me to start at the top, Dawn, or do you want to just go through them yourself?
I was just looking at that last one. The white card of your vaccination, the alert. So your provider or any provider should be able, one, wherever you got your vaccine, they should be able to print that out for you. And two, you should be able to get that from your own doctor or your provider if you have one. So those are the two places that they can print it out, because that alert database says, oh, this person in front of you got Pfizer and it was only 2 weeks ago. So no, they should not be getting a vaccine today, right? That's the point of that alert database. For how long does the vaccine protect us? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, before you jump into that one, because something curious that I've seen happening, I haven't gotten vaccinated yet, but it's become almost like a trend, you know, on social media to take a picture of your little card after you get vaccinated to celebrate, to encourage other people to get vaccinated. So I get that. But I've heard that perhaps that's not the best idea, and for like privacy reasons. But I haven't looked too much into it. I don't know if you can speak to that at all. You're on mute.
I want people to celebrate. It would also not be good if people started forging those, and there is the potential for that. People are worried about this vaccine passport idea, certification that will allow you to get into places. And from a public health perspective, I can imagine why it might be a good idea, right? To have to be able to see people's cards. But at the same time, there are so many communities that are so worried about being tracked, and so many reasons that are barriers and stuff. I don't think we're headed there. It's not a good idea, but you might want to hold off on putting your private information on the web. That's not from my senior health advisor training. For how long does the vaccine protect us? We don't know, Monica. We don't know yet. The best evidence we have suggests 3 to 8 months, but we're waiting. Evidence is emerging still. Annual shot we talked about. Guidelines for interacting with others who are not vaccinated. So there are CDC interim recommendations for people who are vaccinated to be able to interact with one other household that is not vaccinated, but still, maintaining some of the other precautions, but choosing wisely and choosing closely. I don't know those off the top of my head, Danny, but there's a website that will give all of those recommendations.
Does this look like it's it?
Yeah, or it might say interim guidance or something. Yeah.
Well, this is updated April 2nd, so I'll try to look for something else. But I put the link to this page in the chat if folks want to check that out. So it said visit inside a home or private setting without a mask with other fully vaccinated people of any age. So yeah, we can check that out. I was actually just talking about this at the office today.
Messenger works in our DNA. So it's mRNA, and it's just the messenger that tells the cells to build the antibodies against those spike proteins, and then it collapses, it goes away. It doesn't ever get to our DNA that makes our cells. It's only for generating antibodies against those spike proteins. It doesn't mess with our DNA at all.
But I understand that, but it does make the spike protein, and the spike protein stays in your body, does it not?
It makes a fake spike protein.
Yeah, and it stays in your body forever, right?
The fake spike protein?
Yeah, because Because how else is it going to recognize the virus? Because that's its purpose, right? To recognize the virus so it helps build up the antibodies.
It generates fake spike proteins, and then the antibodies learn to recognize the fake spike proteins. So they practice on that, right? So then you build up a bunch of antibodies, right? Which are your own thing. But then the spike proteins, along with those cells, they get dismantled, right? In the same way that your body resorbs after cells go through their life cycle. And but then you're left with antibodies that know how to detect spike protein, so they stay in your body forever. The spike proteins, the fake spike proteins, I don't think I can answer that question very well, Phyllis. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that.
So my other question is, I think, was there any animal testing done?
There was testing done with mice, ferrets, and primates, so that they could make sure that typically they do those in order. That's part of why it takes a long time. This time they did some simultaneously with later stage clinical trials, but there was some animal testing done, yeah.
What was the results of that when they were introduced to the wild virus?
Well, that's how they discovered that it works, so that it could proceed to the next, so that the trials of the vaccines could proceed to the next stages. So then they brought it to humans, but that's how they know that it works, is it prevented the disease in the animal.
Okay, could you can you tell me where I find that data so I could look at that for myself?
That will be referenced in the FDA. Yeah, I can look for those. I won't be able to come up with them tonight, but I can get some references back to Danny for you. Okay.
Yeah, that would be great. I would
Yeah,
really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Danny, you're gonna help me keep track of these, right?
Yeah, I'm taking notes right now.
Thank you. All right, what else have we got? Vaccine safe for people with lupus or other autoimmune diseases. Yes, ma'am. They didn't single people out like that to study them. It turns out that there were people with those diseases, and the vaccines did a fine job of protecting them and didn't aggravate those autoimmune diseases. That said, people who are immune suppressed, such as people on prednisone, those folks might be at increased risk for terrible, severe COVID, and it might be a better idea to protect with the vaccine. These are not live vaccines with coronavirus that can give you the disease, which those vaccines might carry a risk of COVID disease for an immunocompromised person, but these don't, because they don't have that. No live or dead coronavirus. The ingredients, Phyllis, are listed. Listed in, I can pull those up and send them as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. What else have we got? Did I miss any, Danny?
Did you talk about the polyethylene glycol?
No, that's the one that that's what's in it and how is it used.
Oh, okay.
I don't know the answers to that well enough to say anything smart. I can pull that information and send it, and it'll be right, but I won't be right if I try to talk about it now.
Okay. You talked about the Olga's question, right? People with lupus and other autoimmune diseases.
Yeah, Olga, was that part of that?
That was one of my questions. The other one was like, so we have 3 vaccines out there, which one to get? Like yeah, that was my other question between all 3.
It's $1 million question, Olga.
Right.
So right now, Johnson & Johnson is being held. Personally, I would like to get the Johnson & Johnson because I think it was tested in an environment that's closer to the environment that we face today. But it's not available, and it won't be for at least another week or two. And we'll see what happens after that, depending on what they find in this examination of the safety. They're all good. They all prevent death at 100%. They all prevent hospitalization at somewhere between 80 and 95%. There are some breakthrough cases with all of them. Johnson & Johnson is only one shot if it's available. They're all good. That's the party line, and for better or for worse, I agree with it.
But I think a follow-up question for that might be is, how do people even have a choice? You know, like depending on where you go, can you say, oh, well, I would like the Johnson & Johnson one? You know, like I guess how much of choice do folks have?
You know, right now, not as much, because we're in a situation where the demand outstrips supply. So people have sort of a get what you get and don't get upset kind of an attitude. I was not given a choice. I went to the Oregon Convention Center and they said, over there, you're getting Pfizer. And other people went in a different line and they got Moderna. And actually, yeah, I think that, yeah. But I was not given a choice, even though I had said specifically when I signed up that I wanted the J&J vaccine. That said, things are going to change over the course of the next couple of months, and we'll wind up in a situation where we have probably more vaccine than we have demand, and choices will be greater at that point. I know that our commitment to working toward equity in distribution of these vaccines has mandated that we give choice especially in communities where the J&J shot is being offered, because it may be harder for people to access care and come back for a second shot. And we don't want anybody to think that an inferior vaccine is being pushed toward populations or communities that might have trouble accessing care, because it would be really easy to think that if you see the Johnson & Johnson one shot going out to people, and then you look at those numbers and see that the numbers are lower for that J&J vaccine, right? But right now, because most of the organizations don't necessarily have all three, right? They'll have two or even only one to offer. Wherever you can get an appointment is where you get whatever they got for the most part. But if they do have multiple ones, then you might get a choice. And my guess is we'll have more choices down the line.
On the question of equity, I know I've in conversations anecdotally, have talked about, to your point, that the demand is far greater than the supply. What would you say to people who say like, oh, I can wait, I'm not high risk, I'd rather other people get it, because the supply is so limited?
I would have had a different answer to this a month or two ago when we had space out between the sequencing groups. Remember that sequencing thing that said, healthcare workers and people in long-term care facilities, people in nursing homes, like people on the front lines, these are going to go first and everybody else has to wait, right? Yeah. At the beginning, we were spacing it out, and I would have said, as soon as your group comes up, get your vaccine, as soon as you can get it. And that's how we would saturate each of those risk groups in order and maintain that commitment to equity. As we have had to compress the timeline and open things up faster than we were able to saturate, now we've got the entire general population is going to be eligible on Monday. And if young, healthy people outcompete folks who have more difficulty making an appointment, for example, for a vaccine, then there may be some difficulty maintaining that equity out over the next couple of months. I think it's going to shake out in that time frame, right? Because we are going to wind up with more vaccine. Mm-hmm. So get it when you can get it is the party line. And there's a really important truth to that. Get it when you can get it. That's how we're going to get to community immunity, and our families and communities are going to be safer from this thing that has made us close everything down in ways that are really hard. hard for me too. My kids have been home with me this whole year. I've been lucky to be able to be home with them, but I don't think they've gotten the school education experience that would have supported the learning that I would have hoped for this year, you know. And I'm the lucky ones, right? Some of us have the ability, for example, to work from home. I was never able to work from home before.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions, folks?
No, I think mine are all answered. Thank you very much.
That's a
Awesome.
lot of questions. Phyllis, you have some good questions. Monica, Olga, those are good questions.
Monica,
Thank you.
did you want to say something else?
No. I don't have any questions at all. She already answered everything.
Awesome. Well, I want to be sensitive to everybody's time. So I've been taking notes. And so there's a couple of follow-up items that you can look to after this. I don't know. I have Monica and Phyllis information. Teresa, Olga, if you could type your email in the chat for me, or you can send me a private chat so that I can include you in the follow-up email with the recording of this presentation and the other items that Don will get to us after, like the study of the references to the study on animals, information about the ingredients in the vaccine, and some of these other kind of lingering questions. Awesome, thank you.
Teddy, I just have a question about like the people that don't have access to the internet or don't know how to use it, or because of the language barrier. Are they gonna be having, I don't know, is St. Anthony having an event to help people to sign up?
Monica, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, you can call me or you can call Carla. So the social connection, the ladies that work for that ministry, they should help you anytime.
No, I'm just not
Especially
talking about me, so people that I know that don't know how to even turn on a computer, or you know.
Yeah, you just text me, send me all the information of the person who is willing to have the vaccine, and I can sign them up. So it's totally fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They can call 211 too. If they can use a phone, even if they don't speak English, 211 has all kinds of interpreters there. It's their job. And they can get people signed up.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for asking the equity questions. That's really, really one of the very hardest things about this, the disproportionate impact that COVID is having on already highly impacted communities impacted by systemic racism, structural discrimination. We've been working pretty hard to reach folks in those communities, working with organizations like St. Anthony's and other trusted community-based organizations, but there's so much left to do. So thank you so much for coming tonight. Let me know how I can be helpful or supportive. I think we're doing another one on Friday night in Espanol. We're gonna do some Spanish.
In Espanol. So yeah, Monica, Olga, please help spread the word about the Spanish one.
Yeah.
I think that's a perfect segue to wrap up with the realization that this affects especially our immigrant community, our Spanish-speaking community, and other communities of color so much. And so, though we didn't have a huge turnout here, now it's why, it's our responsibility to share with others the recording, of this talk, invite them to the Spanish one on Friday, same time. If you can share with them the link if you've already registered, or contact me, or just, the next person you talk to, whether it's a friend or a family member, share with them the one thing that you learned from this presentation and what Don taught us this evening. So we will only achieve equity and justice, right, if we share that knowledge, and knowledge is power. And in my experience, the myths and misinformation around vaccines in general, but especially the COVID vaccine, is one of the biggest barriers to getting our communities of color vaccinated, and help them understand the situation. So it's not just access to the vaccines, but it's also this other hurdle, which is misinformation and misunderstandings about vaccines. So please help in that process as well. So Don, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your expertise. Thank you, all of you, for participating, and keep an eye for a follow-up email sometime tomorrow.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
All right.
Annie, thank
Have a
you,
good
Don.
night.
Thank you. Good night.